Tokyo TDC
TDC2020, the TDC Award goes to Oliver Knight and Rory McGrath, OKRM. The Journey of Things, Magdalene Odundo. After the presentation, the creative director and judge, Mr. Tota Hasegawa, will also be sharing his message with us.
Hi, this is Oliver, and I'm Rory, and we're talking here today from our studio in London, and it's a pleasure to be sharing the journey of things, Magdalene Odundo, with everyone in Tokyo and around the world via the stream.
So we worked on this book at the beginning of 2019. It was commissioned by the Hepworth Wakefields for an exhibition of the same name and published by In Other Words, our publishing imprint.
The book comprises a series of sections. It's essentially a kind of, you could say, a dichotomy between a historical section and a very contemporary section. The contemporary section is photography that was shot by Marvin Louvry here in London. And the historical section, which is Ollie's going through now, is a selection of contemporary and historical objects which Magdalena and Andrew Bonacina, our collaborator and the curator of the exhibition, brought together in order to establish a narrative around Magdalena's works. So the book object comprises a series of works. Some of those are Barbara Hepworth's, you could say Henry Moore's, Lucci Ray, Jean Arp. What's really nice is that seeing as Magdalena also comes from, her background's Africa, from Kenya, there's a series of objects that also come from Africa and Asia, Central America, and ritual objects across the whole of the African continent. So I think one of the things that's important is that we, as well as being the designers of the book, we're also the publishers. So In Other Words is our publishing imprint. And this is the second book that we published and designed within the collaboration with Andrew Bonacina. Within this series, it's a loose series. It started with Disobedient Bodies, which was the J.W. Anderson. This is the second, and we're just embarking on the third part now.
One of the kind of key characteristics of the books that we've worked on with the Hepworth is this sense of organisation of content, which works in a flow, where each object somehow has a relationship with the next object.
In that sense, you could say it's a certain kind of visual reading potential. So rather than always relying on the texts or specific captioning or interpretation throughout the book, we try to make the books in such a way that you're able to pick it up, revisit it, look through it, have an experience. And in that sense, I think we started to work in that way for a variety of reasons. But one of the main reasons was because we felt as though the role of the exhibition catalogue was becoming very dry, often just being a kind of illustration of the exhibition. In this case, I mean, the most important projects to us have always thrived on a sort of deep level of collaboration, directed around a kind of shared vision with a set of values. In that sense, Andrew and Oliver and us, myself, we work in this kind of deeper way, and that getting closer to the content. You could say it forms a certain kind of intimacy with the content and with the book. There's a natural, I'd say, what you could say, natural, almost we discovered a kind of common appreciation for a period in art publishing where the catalogue was this almost ultimate manifestation of an event. The likes of Pontus Hilton and William Sandberg, for example. In a way, it's hard to truly separate our love for these works from nostalgia, but the more we understand the careers of those like Pontus and William, we realise they were two making use of the same sort of structural levers, where they weren't only designing the books, often with designers, but often themselves also, but they were overseeing the publishing and the whole framing of book projects. So within the book itself, there's we talked about these kind of two layers, or you could almost say a kind of dichotomy of approaches. The first is this layer with, which is very, very much image driven, just to take those pages here. those pages which are very much image driven are all printed on a cover weight, which is something like a 300 gram one-sided box board. What's nice about that is that I guess the idea came in, you could say, in a sort of fairly idiosyncratic way, in that we felt it would be impossible to choose any of these particular objects for the cover of the book. So rather than isolating one cover, we decided to make all of the objects have a certain kind of synergy, and therefore all of the objects have a cover weight, which gives you the potential, I suppose, to reorganize the book in your own way. But more than that, what it does is creates a very, very discrete or autonomous layer for that layer of content. And then the second layer, which is very, very different to that layer, which here we're looking at the captions at the end of the book, but the other layer is printed on what you would say is a kind of classic museological paper. It's the kind of paper that you would have found in a museum catalogue from, you know, any era, honestly. And much of that material is printed in one color black. Occasionally you get full color elements. That's all done with wrapping the sections with a full color. But you also get these pages, which you can see here, this sort of iridescent paper. And the logic for that is you could say it's almost illogical, in that it's there in order to create a certain kind of rupture, a certain kind of disobedience to this logic of those two layers. So when you discover those pages, you start to get a certain sort of playfulness.
One of the things which we kind of enjoyed about the layout of this section is that we didn't really design it in the traditional designer way. Although I guess what we did was to art direct it, in which, I guess to be a bit more specific about that, we really heavily referenced the layouts of certain old books to create the design. So it wasn't so much us inventing a layout as kind of reappropriating it for the form of this book.
So that's something that I guess we've started to feel more and more comfortable with, and I guess that's maybe what Ollie means by not designing in a classical manner, where we'd focus on some sort of unique layout. I guess our position is more become a kind of choreographer of different approaches to design, different approaches to materiality, and then what we start to do is let those approaches form around the dominant work, which is an art direction approach, to make sense of the content visually. So the majority of time is really spent trying to figure out how do these objects make sense and what's the sequence. And the sequence is not the same sequence in the exhibition. In fact, it's completely autonomous from the exhibition in many ways.
Yeah, in that respect, the exhibition really mixed up Magdalen's work with the reference objects, kind of flattening the content in a certain way. But for us, it was very much about trying to create this distinction between what we call historical and contemporary. And that's also something which is present in a lot of our books, which is to start off with a concept which has a very, very clear, almost didactic representation of what's inside.
So like with all books, the main experience would always be best had by just grabbing a copy and looking through it yourself. But for now, I think that's basically what we have to share. So thank you very much again for inviting us to be part of the Tokyo Type Directors Club. We look forward to seeing you in real life in Tokyo soon. And take care and stay safe. Thank you.
See ya.
So congratulations for the TDC Award, The Journey of Things, Magdalene Odundo. And this book of this exhibition was created by Oliver and Rory, the two people called OKRM. First of all, congratulations. And I actually had a chance to take a look at this book when we were in the judging process. And I took this in my hand and I was browsing through all these pages. And I realized that this book actually uses a variety of different materials. And sometimes some of the pages are this typical museological catalog type of paper. And also you also find paper that is a bit thick and shiny, and like the ones you find in the catalogs, and also the thicker ones that are almost typically used in cover sheets. And also, what was characteristic about this is this one here, the transparent or the very thin paper, like a tracing paper, and you see works printed on this thin sheet. And all of these sheets are bound by just by this one ring. And according to the explanation given by these two gentlemen, as you can see, the cover-like pages come in the middle or in the front. It appears in many different places, but it is actually something where you can actually take this off and reshuffle the order of pages to your pleasure. So there's this sense of playfulness in this book. And if you take a close look at this book, the layout is also a combination of various styles. Some are like the traditional art museum catalog type of expression, this, what do you say, this classical type of layout on the one hand, and you also find something like this, as if this is a cover of a magazine. And so anyway, there is really a rich variety of different styles in this book. And what connects all of those different elements is something like this page over here, this really thin paper here. And let me show you another example. Like when you have these two works introduced here, you have the urn over here, and you have another teapot above the urn. And this is something that you can see through, which is a very creative approach. So the way these different items connect with each other, for example, if it's in a music style, it's a combination of different styles of genres of music. And what comes in between the different musical pieces, there are these connecting pieces. And so it's a way of trying to find similar or common elements to connect to different elements. This is another way of how these contents connect to the next. And then all of a sudden you have this cover-like page appearing. So there you really find a lot of playfulness in the way the layouts are designed. And I think these gentlemen took a very experimental approach. And they were also explaining that rather than focusing on each layout of each and every single layout, they were acting as if they were a creative director to produce this entire book as a whole. And I think that is a very interesting factor about this book. And I think, well, I personally think that these people must be music lovers. That is my presumption that I get from the impression of this book. And it really is similar with the way modern music is composed these days. So anyway, congratulations, OKRM.